You know, it's good to be back. Washington, D.C. is a great place to visit. My goal is to bring back some of that winter weather that they have in Washington, D.C. back to Utah. And so if I've done what I should be doing, you'll start seeing some snow here in this next week. So let's hope we can use it here, and they've got too much of it in Washington, D.C. That being said, it is good to be back. I'm pleased with how things are going, generally speaking, with the legislature. I think everybody's working hard. We have some difficult issues, a lot of heavy lifting going on in this session, I think more so than what we've had in other sessions in years past. I was appreciative of seeing the poll today that showed that Utahns really support our efforts to put significant amounts of money into education and supporting our $500 million recommendation for education. That couples with the fact that we found additional monies when the final numbers came out. So I think there is an opportunity to, in a significant way, to fund education. And I think that's important for a lot of reasons. For me, as you know, my focus has been on the economy. What can we do to make sure we have a growing, expanding, healthy economy? And certainly on the long term, that means having an educated workforce, a skilled labor force that can align with the demands of the marketplace. So I'm optimistic we're going to get some good results with our education funding out of this session. So I'm pleased to see that poll this morning. So that's just a good way to start and welcome you here today and see what's on your mind.
Governor, today the American Society of Civil Engineers brought a report card on the infrastructure here in the state of Utah. And the overall goal, our grade was a C+, essentially meaning it's meeting current demand, but there are significant challenges in the future. Can you address the infrastructure and our future challenges here in the state of Utah?
You know, it kind of corresponds with what we also have done our own study with UDOT, looking at our bridges and our roads, and there's no question that we're starting to fall behind in what I would call deferred maintenance. We do typically, at least have had in the past, a maintenance fund that has been shrinking over the years. We've not replenished the monies in appropriate numbers to maintain what we're building. Part of my proposal with our budget, in fact, recommendation was to put more money into transportation, particularly to replenish the maintenance aspect of that. We should be putting about 1.5% to 2% of our monies set aside for transportation into the maintenance fund. If we're going to build them, we need to maintain them. And UDOT's on top of that. Again, I think that's part of the ongoing discussion with transportation funding. And if we do what appears to be talked about in both the Senate and the House and come up with more long-term funding, I think this maintenance aspect will be taken care of and we can move from a C+ up to something better.
Does the gas tax potentially fit into this as far as future funding?
Absolutely. Gasoline tax, sales tax, a combination. We've talked about the revenue stream that we need to have to build over the next till 2040, which is what we've done our estimates on, and the fact that we'll be $11 billion short. Part of that is maintenance. We need to have money for the maintenance, and so the discussion you see going on here in the legislature on whether it should be a gasoline tax, whether it should be a sales tax somehow indexed for inflation, to recapture what we've lost, in fact, with inflation and better performing automobiles, or a hybrid of all the above. Some of that money will be peeled off into the maintenance aspect of our construction, our roads, highways, and bridges.
Are you confident the legislature will address the gas tax increase? They seem to like the idea of coming up with more money for roads, but can't agree on a vehicle for that, if you will.
I'm confident that they'll get something done. I think both House and Senate, Republican, Democrat alike, realize that we've got to make some adjustment on transportation funding. Clearly the pathway we're on is going to create a huge gap down the road. So now's the time to make some adjustments so that we don't have the gap. And again, whether it's a gasoline tax only or a sales tax only, I guess that's part of the debate. Those are maybe the parameters, but it may be a combination of both. And I expect that the Senate and the House will come together on some plan that they both feel good about. And so I really think that's going to happen.
Governor, there's a couple of bills already out dealing with liquor laws. One would tear down the sign curtains, any position you have on that?
You know, if there's ever a reoccurring theme up here, it seems to be alcohol laws, and I'm prepared just to give it a rest. You know, we're working pretty good. I know there's some other things out there that are talking about, but let's give it a rest and come back. And if we have to do some comprehensive work on liquor laws in a future session, fine. But let's see if we can get all the parties together. And, you know, I don't see any need to make any adjustments right now.
You say you're optimistic about education. The numbers roughly that I understand are you want 500 million new money.
503 million.
Thank you. They seem unenthusiastic about clawing back the sales tax from the earmark, 94 million. They have set aside for legislative priorities another 116 million, which you didn't have in your budget. So that's 220 million out. But you got a good deal on the new revenue estimates, so say you get 50 or 100 million back there. Still,
Let's say 100 million.
that's the whole thing.
Well, hey,
That's what
Lord giveth and Lord taketh away. We're trying to balance it out. We lost 100 million, 94 million because of what the earmarks. Now we've got 100 million back because of increased revenue.
Okay, still, I count you 100, more than 100 million short, and that seems to be optimistic. Why, if you're looking at $100 million shortfall, why are you smiling?
Because I'm just happy to be here with all of you. You know, I think there's reason to be optimistic. We're talking about $636 million of new money when we made our recommendations and projections, and now another $100 million has come on top of that. Hey, we ought to all be smiling. We ought to be giggly. I mean, it means that our economy is growing. It's robust. It's healthy, and we're one of the best, if not the best, most dynamic economy in America today. That bodes well for us not only today but for our future. Now, I understand we need to be prudent. We need to be, thoughtful. We want to make sure that we are fiscally responsible and make sure that we live within our means, don't spend more than we take in, make sure we don't have unreasonable debt, and save for rainy day. And we're replenishing the rainy day fund. So I understand the idea that the legislature says, let's be a little cautious here. And I think that's right. But at the end of the day, I think we have additional revenues to spend. And I think we'll have a significant increase. My target was 500 million, 503 million. But I expect that we're going to get something of a significantly big number to help us with funding of our public education and our higher education needs. And that's reason to have a smile.
What about the earmark removal that you saw in your budget? The speaker said last week that's a heavy lift, and in a session with a lot of heavy lifts, they probably won't get to that.
Again, there's a lot of things going on. Again, there's a lot of important issues. And the good news is that now as I talk to the legislature, most all of them seem to think and say, maybe that earmark is not such a good idea. Maybe we can't take it off this year, but we ought to be looking towards taking it off sometime in the future. And why not? Why would you want to tie your hands? Think, if you're a legislator, why would you want to have somebody say, well, 20% has got to come off the table here. You can't even talk about where you should prioritize that because it's already, the decision's been made because it's earmarked. So again, I think there's a realization that having 20% earmarked for transportation and 40% of all the new money coming in the general fund is also earmarked for transportation is probably not a long-term sustainable policy, not a good policy in my view. So I'm glad to see that people are kind of recognizing that, and I think we'll make some adjustments, whether we'll get all that I think should be done, but the fact that they're recognizing that there ought to be an adjustment made is a step in the right direction.
Since we spoke to you last about Healthy Utah, you've gone from a 3-year pilot to a 2-year sunset. You've put some money on the table potentially, but you say you may not need that. And then the House met, and you've actually seemed to have lost support there since you put those on the table. Where can you go? Where else can you go on this?
Well, there's only one legislature, and that's where I'm going. And there's, pros and cons on probably any idea that's put out there for discussion. But I'm continuing to work with the legislature. Again, I think it's the common sense approach. It respects the taxpayers. If you care about those people who are paying the bills, and it's about $800 million a year and growing. I've said all along, if there's a better idea out there, I want to hear it. If the House has got a better idea, let's hear it. Doing nothing's not an option. That's not good for the taxpayer, not good for the people that need a little help on their health care. We're talking about people that make, $15,500 a year or less. 60% of them are working. There are working poor. So this is really a kind of a common sense approach to resolve the issue. Again, I think that the Senate seems to be embracing that program, and I hope that they get that bill over to the House where they can have a robust debate, where they can have it in committees and let the public come in and give them comments, pro and con, and then go to the floor for, in fact, a debate from the body, and we'll see where the votes go. But again, I welcome anybody and everybody, particularly the House, if they're having problems with this, to come up with a better proposal.
But you said you pushed the Obama administration about as hard as you can, as far as they're willing to go, and the House is still not even close to going that.
Well, I don't know. You maybe know something I don't know. But again, whatever the arguments are in opposition, bring them forward. I think we can address revenue streams. We can address uncertainty. That's why it's a pilot program. We have the ability, I think, to cap enrollment so we don't have runaway expenses. We were making people, when they sign up, to automatically enroll into the work program, which is going to help people get off government assistance, get a better job, and get into the workforce, assuming they're able-bodied. If they're not able-bodied, to give them health care to help them to become able-bodied. I mean, it's a wonderful approach to helping people get off government assistance and be able to support themselves. We're also having them sign up in the very beginning. This is a pilot program. If you sign up on this program, know this program may be modified or eliminated over the next 2 or 3 years based on certain sets of parameters and data, making sure that the federal government keeps their part of the bargain. All the issues that you hear asked about, we have answers for. So again, at the end of the day, I hope the House will take this bill, debate it. If they've got some improvements to another approach that they'd like to proffer, I'm willing to listen.
If Healthy Utah were voted today in the House, do you have a sense of where it would land, how many votes away you would be?
I have no idea. Again, you hear all kinds of rumors. I expect that, like anything else, it's probably pretty close, and 50-50. Who knows what it is? A lot depends on whether people will vote their conscience, or if they're worried about re-election efforts, and if there's intimidation from leadership. I mean, there's all kinds of factors that makes a determination as far as how people will, in fact, couch their vote or cast their vote. What I do know is we have about 75 different entities, most all the chambers of commerce, the business community, grassroots people, people involved in the medical health service industry. Up and down the state of Utah, the public polling shows 60% support or more. So the overwhelming support we're receiving, which has kind of been spontaneous, it's not anything that I'm orchestrating, but people out there recognize, I think, the common sense that we provide with the Healthy Utah approach. So I hope the legislature is listening. They should represent the people, and we can certainly see where the people are at on this issue. So I'm still cautiously optimistic that we'll get something done.
Governor, can you talk a little more about that cap? You indicated on your conference call yesterday from DC, you had a chance to talk with Secretary Burwell, and she's willing to do more with a cap. I know that's something you've looked at before. It's something that some lawmakers have suggested there'd be movement on.
Again, I think the concern for many is that if we end up getting involved in this and it goes long term, will we end up having a runaway people joining that we hadn't planned on, that the numbers will, and it will be more expensive than what we originally planned on. By the way, we have a plan for revenue stream. We've taken that off the table to make it really a pilot program where we don't have to raise any tax, don't have to make any adjustment, do it with the existing revenue streams, and test the theory. Let's find out. There's a lot of speculation on this, of what will happen if we have a Healthy Utah program. So let's test the theory and see what the truth is, as opposed to this wild speculation going on. Secretary Burwell said, we'll work with you on capping. They certainly have given us every opportunity, and it will be in writing, that we can get out at any time. There's no reason to believe we'll be locked into anything. In fact, just the reverse, we can get out any time that we want, a year from now, 2 years from now, if we continue on 4 years from now. So we're not going to be locked into anything that we can't afford or sustain. I think there's opportunities for us to develop fallback positions. For example, we could have an expanded PCN as a fallback position if we find out that we can't afford it going forward, which would take care of those up to 100% of poverty, the most frail amongst us, but we could probably expand that program as a fallback position. So there's other options out there. The good news about a pilot program is we can study, collect data, and then do what we need to do to hopefully find it sustainable in the long term. And the Department of Health is willing to work with us. Our Dr. Patton and his folks are doing a great job in putting this together. And we're getting support, statewide from about every group you can think of. So again, if we really care about representing the people, this is something the legislature ought to embrace.
Is the cap on enrollment, or is it on expenditures, and what level are you looking at? When you
Probably on enrollment and based on your conditions. So, the most frail, the most, the ones that have the most health needs would be taken care of first. And there'd probably be larger deductibles and things of that nature that we'd have to make some adjustments. But that's kind of a work in progress as we go down the road over the next couple of years to make sure we come to that point where everybody feels good about it. And if we don't, then, as people have signed and acknowledged, I sign up knowing this program can be eliminated in 2 years. If you don't like that, don't sign up. If we can't get it worked out, then the program will cease to exist in 2 years. By the way, the 2 years is kind of a good time just because of the political aspects of the Affordable Care Act. Because the question for all of us is going to be, what happens in 2016? Will the Republicans capture the White House? That could be a major opportunity to have modification and change with the Affordable Care Act. That's assuming that the Republicans control the Senate, still maintain the Senate, because that's not going to be an easy thing to hold, because so many Republicans, about 24 Republican senators are up, and only 10 Democrats. So you got to hold the Senate, and I think we can hold the House, and capture the White House. Then we have a chance to probably make some changes and modifications to the Affordable Care Act, which probably would line up more with the culture of Utah and with our legislature.
Governor, a right to die bill has now been made public and could hit committee anytime. It's the Utah Death with Dignity Act. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the bill, but in general, where do you stand on a person with a terminal illness's right to end their life on their terms in their right way?
Well, I think, again, the ability to die with dignity, and of course that's kind of a phrase we use, and it probably means different things to different people. We've all had loved ones pass away, and their ability to die with dignity, meaning they've been put in a position of comfort. They maybe have do not resuscitate instructions that have been done before, so that when these kinds of traumatic emotional things happen, that they've left instructions. This is what I want you to do. I know it's happened with my parents, and so I understand that from a personal experience. So I understand that part, and bringing in hospice and making people comfortable at their end of year time. I'm a little concerned about this morphing into really a right to suicide. I think that we need to respect life, and it needs to be revered and elevated. And although I know there's some concerns about end-of-life issues, I would want to, and I haven't read the bill, so I don't know all the details, but I would not want this to be something that really is a Kevorkian scheme. It ends up being the unintended consequence of somebody that says, life is tough, I'm old, whatever the rationale is, and so they have a right to end their life in some form or fashion. I'd be a little concerned about that.
Would you talk about medical marijuana, please?
I believe that as a controlled substance, cannabis oil should be utilized to help with seizures. We've passed that law last year. I'm a little concerned about what I've observed in other states where they've said you can grow for medical purposes and your own self-diagnosis, or you get some doctor who is less than strict about his own diagnosis, and the next thing you know, we've got recreational marijuana. A lot of folks in California are saying that that's what's happened to their state, and probably that'll morph to recreational marijuana. I was with Governor John Hickenlooper just yesterday, and the question came up when we were involved with the discussion about his own state's experience with recreational marijuana that's been imposed by the voice of the people. He still has voiced his own reservations and concerns. He was opposed to it as governor. He says most every elected official in Colorado was opposed to it. And he's saying to the other governors, be cautious, be careful. Wait and see what happens in our states before you jump towards any kind of legalization of recreational marijuana. So that's my concern, is at that end of the spectrum. As a controlled substance, if we can use the marijuana plant, the cannabis oil, under the strict instructions of a certified medical doctor, and it can help with somebody's medical condition, then it probably could be appropriately utilized. But we need to be very careful as we go down that road.
Governor, today, count my vote, bills were up in the Senate, at least one was, and it was defeated, the one that would have delayed implementation. The other that would amend the Constitution is on third reading. Do you think the count my vote deal will hold this session? I know that that's been your desire, but there is legislation out there, and your own party is pushing pretty hard to get the lawmakers to.
Well, some members of the party are, and I understand that. And again, I've been a strong supporter of the caucus convention system. I've said to anybody who cares to listen that it's allowed an average guy like me to compete against people with better name identification and more money. And so for me, the caucus convention system has been a good vehicle. It works best when everybody shows up at the neighborhood caucus. If only a few show up, then it sometimes gets distorted. So that being said, again, for I think good and rational reasons, the legislature last year with Senate Bill 54 said we're going to lose the caucus convention system. The belief was, unless we end up striking some kind of a compromise. And so in good faith, they said to the count my vote folks, look, if you'll pull off, we'll compromise and we'll get a hybrid here where we preserve and protect the caucus convention system rather than lose it. And so I think Senator Bramble and Representative McKay and others in the legislature wisely decided that was a good compromise. So I think they need to be careful about, looking like we've dealt in bad faith. It's like, well, we suckered you into that, and now we spring a trap on you. Is not going to be good for our own integrity, but I don't think it's the perception of the general public is going to be good about that. So I think they need to keep their bargain. I do think that there is a proposal out there to put on the ballot a constitutional amendment to see if people want to have the state have the convention system or change it to just a general primary. And that's, I'm all for the will of the people. And if that comes about, that's probably a good resolution to the issue. But I think they need to keep faith.
So you'd support that constitutional amendment?
Again, if the people want to vote and say this is how we want to have our elections and have that kind of choice, I don't have any problem with putting it to a vote of the people. But that's kind of where the count my vote folks were going, and so it may be a little bit redundant. I think there's some that fear that the will of the people will be to do away with the caucus convention system. Hence, we have Senate Bill 54. And, I was one that probably, I'm a strong convention caucus believer. Again, my own life is an example of what can happen for the average guy can be able to compete. So that being said, I think that the Senate Bill 54 was an act of wisdom in preserving that, even though it's not exactly what it was before, and people can have another pathway to the general primary ballot.
Thank you, Governor.
All right, thank you all. We're more than halfway. I've been told 2 weeks of this coming Thursday. So time is flying fast.
Is